You're listening to The Sacred Sofa, a podcast that explores all things theology and therapy. My name is Grace Brown. I'm a registered psychotherapist, certified Canadian counselor, and owner of Journey with Grace Counseling Services.
And I'm Brad Watson, pastor of Nexus Church and author of the book, A Path Called Compelling. Welcome to The Sacred Sofa. Well, friends, just like that, the end of summer has come, and we hope it was a great summer season for all of you. But with the fall season now upon us, we are almost ready for a new season of The Sacred Sofa. Starting next week, September 12th, we'll be launching brand new episodes filled with all new content. We can hardly wait.
Until then, we have one final summer episode, and we hope it is a helpful one for us all as we enter a new season. This episode is all about finding healthy rhythms in time. We hope you enjoy.
So we've spent the last two episodes talking about chasing speed, the cult of speed, and trying to redeem time a little bit. So we talked about Sabbath last time a little bit. And this past Sunday, I just talked about rhythms. And, there's some church-specific rhythms for people, but I thought it might be interesting for us this morning to maybe dive into what personal rhythms might look like and what might be helpful for people, I think, in an age where we always feel like we're going too fast. So I talked about some daily rhythms I have, weekly, seasonal, annually. So maybe before we get directly into what maybe those look like, I thought maybe I'd throw it over to you and just ask, we talk a lot about intention on here. What, so many of us, we just kind of go through the calendar. What are the benefits or what are some ways we can become more intentional about setting up rhythms in our calendar?
Mm-hmm. I like how you began in your sermon teaching just about storing and meaning along with time. And, it struck me that to be a Christ follower or walk the Jesus path is in many ways being countercultural in many respects. And so we can take principles such as Sabbath, such as being intentional about our pace and rhythm to counteract society's influences and often demands for us to be hyper productive, hyper busy, filling our calendars. And so I'm really liking this series as we talk about Sabbath, rhythm and time and intention. If you're not paying attention, you're going to miss. We're going to talk a little bit later in the podcast about a therapeutic modality on mindfulness. And what does that mean? Well, mindfulness means paying attention. And so, paying attention to the cues of our mind and our body can actually remind us that we're out of rhythm, feeling irritable, cranky, overwhelmed is one of the things I hear often in my therapeutic space. Those are indicators that we haven't had our rest, are intentional about Sabbath and slowing the pace of life.
Yeah, I was thinking one of the tensions for me, at least, is that you've got the church calendar, right, which starts with Advent. Christmas is actually a 12-day affair, but there's this real tension for me because I know some people are pretty church calendar purists, I would call them. Advent, so most of the month of December is supposed to be spent in longing, anticipation. So there's this tension, though, because I've got more social engagements in December, and I often find that by the time I get to Christmas, I'm tired out. And I know the church calendar was designed for anticipation, longing, waiting, and then you get 12 days of celebration. I think for many of us, it's, Christmas is here. Now I've got a week to just crash because, it's been so busy. So for me, there's always this interesting tension trying to follow some rhythms, intentional rhythms, and whether that's the church calendar or not, that's one way to look at it. But how often cultural expectations versus intentional rhythms kind of clash. And, I don't want to be a purist, like, no, don't set up the Christmas tree till Christmas Eve or anything like that, but trying to find a balance there. And that, for me, I think is always the difficulty, is trying to find a balance. This week, for instance, I out 3 evenings of the week with meetings,
Hmm.
you start to sort of slip and go, oh, I'm feeling out of sync. And so it can be
Hmm.
so difficult to find that balance.
Hmm. So let me jump in. I'm actually going to start then with mindfulness.
Okay.
Mindfulness in its purest form means to pay attention.
Mm.
So years ago, I had a client whose husband was an avid builder of birdhouses.
Okay.
And she said to me that there are lots of birdhouses in Kitchener. And clearly she looked at my face. It was kind of dubious because I lived in Kitchener for quite some time
Yeah.
and don't think I quite noticed that there were a lot of birdhouses as she claimed. And so she challenged me to pay attention. So
Hmm.
that afternoon I drove home and I started looking. Birdhouse, birdhouse, birdhouse. Now, Brad, they didn't magically appear. They were
Right.
there the whole time,
Right.
but it was I who was changed.
Hmm.
I was now intentional about noticing.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things specifically about the sacred calendar is it is a call to notice. It is a
Mm-hmm.
call to reflection. Advent, I actually get excited about Advent because I feel like I now have permission, Brad, to
Yes.
actually slow it down and be
Mm-hmm.
intentional about those 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas
Mm-hmm.
celebration. For me, it's a reminder annually that there's something important about this season of celebration that I'm called to, believing that Jesus is the reason for the season, to quote one of
Mm-hmm.
those old gospel songs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and so, the mindfulness, the paying attention to what's happening in my mind. Do I
Mm.
feel scattered and confused? Am I feeling irritable and short with the people around us? Like if we're paying attention to those cues, they are indicating things are out of balance.
Mm.
We're moving faster than our pace. And so that mindfulness can be used not only therapeutically, but spiritually as well,
Mm.
taking time to pause and reflect.
Right. Yeah, and it seems to me from what you're saying that's ultimately rhythm is, trying to find maybe some balance, but it's also about paying attention when you're in rhythm, right? you
Mm-hmm.
you you understand there's need for pause, there's all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of benefits to rhythm. So I don't know, I don't want to spring this on you. I shared a little bit about my personal rhythms, and I could take us through that a little bit, the ways that I try to set up my days, weeks,
Mm-hmm.
seasons, years, because I think there's something valuable in what I realized is on Sunday I almost asked people to take out their phones and start putting stuff in, but I thought that might be a bit pushy. But I know for me it can be, if something's not in the calendar, or how often we struggle with, okay, my calendar's empty, it doesn't say anything there, this is normally the day that maybe I hang out with family or whatever, but because nothing's in the calendar, I don't feel like I can say no to people, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, nothing's officially on. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if we worked a little bit more strategically with our calendars, putting in time to notice, mindfulness, prayer, those sorts of things,
Mm-hmm.
if that would start to help us recapture a bit of our a balance and rhythm with time. But do you want me to go? Are there any specific rhythms maybe that you could share with listeners that might be helpful?
Mm-hmm. The first thing is, again, paying attention, right? Often, and I think you talked in your sermon about noticing in the negative. Sometimes the negative feeling actually is a strong indicator, one that makes us
Mm,
pay attention. But, I can share personally, one of my weekly rhythms is a Sunday. Like that's the
mm,
best day of the week for me,
mm-hmm,
where, Saturday the chores have been done and, the errands and so on and so forth, but Sunday intentionally is my quiet morning start. I attend Nexus,
mm-hmm,
and then that's my time to do whatever mindfully I feel like. So it
mm,
could mean a nap. It could
mm,
mean booking time with a friend who I haven't seen in a while. It
mm-hmm,
could be journaling, reading, watching a show, doing a jigsaw puzzle, something that's relaxing, but
right.
the lack of specific routine is super important to me
Mm,
to not feel like I'm scheduled for that day. So
yeah.
it's a dual purpose. One, it slows down my pace in preparation for my week. It also allows me to stay present with what I'm feeling in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps me recover from the week of giving of myself therapeutically, giving of myself as a partner, as a mom, as a friend, and all those things that are important to me.
Yeah.
And Brad, let me tell you, when I miss it, I feel it. And I'll
Yes.
be vulnerable and say the people around me feel it too. Because I'm less capable of being impatient and irritable because I know my energy has been drained to the point of I haven't had time to regroup and recover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really is truly the essence, the core of Sabbath there, right? Captured
Mm-hmm.
that 1 day period where, and all of those things sound delightful, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
there's an interesting thing there that you pointed out, though, that the activities you choose to do are not stressful. They're calming, a jigsaw puzzle. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we can fill our downtime with stuff that maybe is stressful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to find those things that, you know what, I don't have to think a lot here, I don't have to pour myself out.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff. That's good.
And Brad, you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to touch on briefly is somehow because of our influences and demands of society, we've become afraid of downtime. If there's nothing in your calendar, is there anything wrong with that? What
mm,
would it be like to just be?
mm,
You know, I've heard it said we're human beings, not human doers. But
right.
we've got that flipped. Do you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of boundary work, we don't have to justify what's in our calendar or is not.
mm,
If so there an invitation comes and you check in with yourself and you're like, you know what, I really don't have the capacity. It's okay to say, you know what, thank you so much for the invite. I'd love to do something another time.
right.
No explanation necessary.
Yeah.
And then you can choose that nothing time to do whatever that is restful and
mm,
allows you to reconnect with yourself.
mm. Now, I'm curious about this because you brought up something that I've heard from a few people over the years and quite recently, that sometimes time on our own, nothing on the calendar, no distractions, is something that people are scared of.
Mm-hmm.
Alone with our thoughts. And for some people, it can be almost anxiety provoking. There's
Mm-hmm.
just so much going on in their heads, things. And even, I've talked with a few people recently, and again, I'm no mental health expert, but with the rise of ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
being diagnosed, that I've heard from even some friends that their brain's moving so quickly that without distraction, it's like their head can get jumbled. So I wonder
Mm-hmm.
if there's some practical ways to coach people through, okay, if you are alone with your thoughts, what
Mm-hmm.
does that look like? Now, I can maybe speak a bit to prayer, but all these
Mm-hmm.
things, mindfulness, what does that look like, so that when we are alone, when we are on downtime, that our head is not just spinning and it becomes something that we try to avoid rather than something we can embrace?
Hmm. I'm going to go back to societal influences. We are being influenced by society to run away from things that are uncomfortable, right?
Mm,
You pick it.
mm,
There's a pill, there's an ointment, there's a cream, there's,
mm-hmm,
you know what I mean? There's a
mm-hmm.
drink, a smoothie. Like
Yeah.
there's always something to avoid this discomfort. And connected to mindfulness is a meditation practice. What is meditation? Meditation is taking pause, capturing those thoughts, being curious rather than critical or judgmental about what are the thoughts racing through my head. I believe through the mindfulness and meditation practice, including prayer, and we'll talk a little bit about that later,
Mm,
there is information there. What is spinning in your mind? What
mm,
are the voices saying? What is the internal dialogue saying? If we can capture the messages, then there might be action steps that our mind as well as our body is trying to tell us.
mm-hmm.
You and I are sort of, getting older in years. I know, you've shared a few aches and pains here and
Oh,
there.
yes, yes.
What is pain but an indicator of something awry,
Mm,
right?
so true.
And so, whatever the messages are, you don't know if something's awry if you're not taking time to pause and listen to what is being said. And then
Mm,
there are strategies. So let's say, it just is too busy in your mind. There are different types of tools that people can use to the mind, not
mm,
only in terms of meditation, but in terms of sound. You've heard of white noise. There's also
yeah.
gray, brown, pink noise. There are different frequencies with which
Mm,
our mind can tap into and bring a sense of calm. You know, for me, it's music,
mm.
non-lyrical music,
Yeah.
and the key here is non-lyrical
Yeah.
because, all of a sudden it's Beyonce and,
Yeah.
I've come out of my meditative state, doing a
Mm,
little jig, but it's just the soothing classical jazz, the rhythm of that non-lyrical music can also bring calm to my mind
mm.
as well as my body. And so be curious about why we're running away from the noise rather than embrace, capture, and then identify and respond accordingly.
Mm. That that makes me laugh there, Grace, because I have a bit of a pet peeve. When I go for a massage, I
Mm.
like the person to have on sort of new agey flute music. I want to feel like I'm in
Mm-hmm.
Rivendell in Lord of the Rings, relaxing, right?
Yes.
But I've gone a few times where they'll even have like acoustic guitar, pop
Mm-hmm.
hits on acoustic guitar, and then the lyrics get in my head and I can't
Yes.
stop thinking about it. I need something neutral, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
not going to
Mm-hmm.
trigger something there. But even I'm really curious about the pain metaphor there, because you're right. So often we want to stay away from, things that might be uncomfortable, painful. I think about my knee, right? That's one of my issues I've had, and it can be uncomfortable, but then I ignore it or I try to,
Mm-hmm.
drown it in Advil, but then it gets to the point where it will seize up and I can hardly walk, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like if you keep ignoring this pain and don't do something about it, don't start whatever needs to be done,
Mm-hmm.
eventually it will become, for me, quite literally crippling, right? Like you can't
Mm-hmm.
do much there. And I think there's something as well. We can keep pushing off in our mind these things that cause anxiety, these things we're stressed about. But if we keep bottling with just trying to distract ourselves, eventually it can get to the point where it becomes almost all consuming,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to deal with things before it gets to that point.
Absolutely. And in terms of mindfulness and meditation, the goal, it is impossible for our mind to be truly empty, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we think, well, these yogis and gurus, on the mountaintop, they've got it made. That is a years of practice. And
Right.
I would submit that their mind isn't completely empty. They've just gotten really good at the skill of saying, here's a wandering thought. I want to be curious about it. Okay, I'm going to put it away and I'll come back to it as needed. Like they've
Mm-hmm.
gotten really good at noticing, not judging, putting it
Mm-hmm.
away. Notice,
Mm-hmm.
and then that brings the calm.
Yeah, as a practice, I thought, Grace, I bring up prayer, and I'm sure, depending on who you're dealing with as a client, whether a person of faith or not, right? Maybe
Mm,
that there's differences there, but I'm really intrigued by. I recently read a book by D.L. Allison, Encountering Mystery,
mm,
and he talks about all the. I mean, it's well documented, kind of the psychological benefits of prayer. It's as good for you as a massage, it's, or exercising. Like it has the same sort of calming effects. But
mm,
for
mhm,
me, one of the things that was most interesting is he talked about how in his study, so he did this, academic study surveying how people pray, and for every 100 people that pray, there's about 100 different methods.
mhm,
And I've experimented my whole life. How do I make this work? And I know one of the last couple of years, one of the things that has helped me is, as I get into, if I just go straight to prayer, okay, I'm going to pray,
mm,
I get very distracted. Like you're saying, I don't have the discipline yet, like the yogi, to kind of, oh, I'm interested in that thought, put
mm,
it aside. That I find that hard. So I get pretty scattered. But for me, I've started working with a liturgy, spoken word out
mm,
loud,
mhm,
that takes me on a bit of a journey and then brings me into that place of prayer by going through that liturgy where, okay, I've calmed myself and now I'm
mhm,
ready for, it can be as simple as 2 minutes, 5 minutes, but
mhm,
that lead up there, almost like warming up before an exercise, right, has
Mm-hmm.
become
Mm-hmm.
important for me. And I think that at times that's what can be frustrating to people is you go, okay, I know mindfulness or meditation or prayer would probably be a good rhythm for me to add to my days. But the moment I turn off the phone, TV, and start to do it, my mind just wonders, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
trying to help people find a way, okay, here's some ways to maybe gently enter into these practices rather than
Yes.
hoping you're going to be a yogi expert immediately, just be able to
Mm-hmm.
shut off everything. It's much more difficult than that.
And we have to be honest with ourselves, like because we're so influenced by society to keep going faster, 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 do this, quick fix. We talk about all of those things. We have to remember that anything that we want to maintain long term is going to take time, commitment, and regular practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
the practice of meditation, the practice of joining with God and our community through prayer is going to take practice. Your
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness and time of reflection is going to help you find strategies that move you into that place where you're going to reap those benefits. You mentioned going to massage,
Mm-hmm.
right? One massage once every 6 months, you're
Yeah.
not going to
Yeah.
see much progress.
Right. Right.
And so a pattern of regularly going to have this practitioner, soothe those sore muscles and bring more flexibility and all of those things is so important. I'm just chuckling because my friend talked me into going to yoga, and it's been
Okay.
12 weeks. Brad, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't had not had a good attitude.
Oh,
But at week 5, all of a sudden my shoulders moved in a way they didn't. And I was like, I kind of broke the quiet of the class because I was like
right.
so shocked that I could do the move, the
Right.
pose. But it took 5 weeks to get to that point.
Mm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be patient with the rhythm of our minds, patient with the rhythm of our bodies, patient with the rhythm of our spirits. It's
Mm-hmm.
so incredibly important.
Yeah, and we stop learning and growing, right? Like I was even reflecting as you're talking about massage. How often when I go for a massage to work on something and the actual massage itself hurts, like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, really digging in on that sore muscle, right? And so some sort of connection between in order to heal, to grow, to find rhythm, there's going to be pain. And it's the same with your yoga, right? Okay, you for those first 5 weeks, maybe you feel clumsy trying to do the poses, but it takes time, it takes effort in learning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's so interesting to me, the way pain and growth sort of work together.
Whenever there's growth, there's going to be uncomfortableness and
Mm,
there's going to be uncertainty and anxiety. That's the point. You're doing something new, you're out of your comfort zone. And so, if you can push past that fear and anxiety and uncertainty that wants you to run back to where it feels safe, you're going to actually enter the learning zone
mm.
and learn new skills and things like that. And then you're going to, by the time that feels comfortable, it's going to be time to push yourself again. And that's the point of evolving and growing as human.
Yeah. Another rhythm that I talked about, and I know you just had a bit of an experience with this, but some sort of rhythm of wonder in
Mm.
our lives, right? So I live fairly close to downtown. Getting out to the woods actually isn't that easy for me to find,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
little forest or somewhere. There's of course the annual thing. I like some trip. I know you go to Newfoundland, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful there. So there are
Mm-hmm.
times when you find these places of just such sublime beauty that it hushes you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But going to Utah, Newfoundland, the Rockies, whatever, that's not accessible every week. And I was thinking, I try, doesn't always work, try to get out to a little patch of woods, usually with
Mm-hmm.
the dog, walk once a week, or some sort of building. Church often does it for me, right? A building that hushes me a little. Sometimes the library. I'm curious though about your. I know you have rhythms of wonder too. I know you just got
Mm-hmm.
away a few weekends ago.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you try to schedule something in that's beyond like a weekly or a daily thing, but something a bit bigger than, yeah.
Mm-hmm. To date, it's been the weekly practice. I do have an annual personal retreat which
Mm.
always confuses my husband. But I missed it. It's been at least a couple seasons. I usually around fall, October area time of the
Hmm.
year, I go away and do a weekend personal retreat. My goal is to
Hmm.
make it longer at some
Right.
point. And again, following the rhythm of my mind and my body, what it needs is a really
Hmm.
beautiful time being isolated away from external stimuli. It's really important. It's my goal to at some point do something more quarterly.
Mm.
So I have my weekly and then I have my annual,
Hmm.
outside of things like Christmas, Advent, that sort
Sure.
of thing.
Sure.
But I'd like to do something quarterly. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be at this point,
Yeah.
but I have found that for me, it needs to be surrounded by some form of nature,
Hmm.
especially water. That is very
Hmm.
calming, healing for me.
Yep.
And so, which is why one of the reasons why I really enjoy Newfoundland, because you're on an island surrounded by water. And
Right.
I can sit for hours, Brad, especially if the temperature is
Yes.
good.
It's
I
nice.
can sit
Yes.
for hours and just watch the waves, listen to the birds, like even the sound of the water. I don't
Mm.
know how to explain it. Just does something inside of me that just says peace,
Mm.
calm. And I also feel a commune with God. God is here. God is watching over me. All is right in the world in this moment. And it's such a powerful, powerful experience.
Yeah, and I've whenever our family goes up to Nova Scotia, we always plan a
Mm.
few hours at Peggy's Cove to just sit, just sit. And I've
Mm.
had that experience on the West Coast as well. And what's interesting, I'm glad you brought up waves because there's a rhythm, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's something about watching the natural rhythms, and you can't sit for a month and watch the lunar calendar, but the waves are such a tangible, in the moment, here's a rhythm. And there's something, I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you, it's mystical. There's something deeply healing, or at least refreshing, about that. Brings you almost back into your own
Mm-hmm.
rhythm with yourself, right? A
Mm-hmm.
great practice for anyone to try to get into their calendar. Now I'm curious, this is just a cure, hopefully this benefits people. I'm curious why the fall, because that stuff interests me, right? Like if you do
Mm-hmm.
your personal treat, why the fall? Why not the winter, summer, spring? Why is there
Mm-hmm.
something about fall, changing leaves? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think it's again the rhythm of the calendar. So January is often a perfect time for me for reflection. Some
Mm,
people talk about New Year's resolutions. January is like another mini restart. And
yep.
then, because I've had children and September is like the school starts again, right? You sort of
Hmm.
off and running with that seems to be just a natural calendar year for me
Right.
space. So September is like, okay, back to school, back to all of the regular routines. And
Yep.
then October is just this mini restart again. And it's like, okay, children are off to school, that's off and running. Okay, let me take a moment and say, okay, what's in this remainder of the year for me? And then that
Hmm.
gets me right till December again. Like, so I have these increment places throughout the year where I can just recenter and
Yep.
regroup, recenter and regroup.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful. And even just thinking about my birthday's October 1st, I usually try to
Mm.
do something every year around that, a night or two away. Because, like you said, I think you summed it up really well. September feels like, with kids and whatnot, it feels like the real new year. That's when everything sort of
Mm-hmm.
really starts. But what happens immediately is you come out of summer, you're a bit out of the rhythm. You've got all these, okay, here's what my fall is going to look like. September is like a Mack truck, right? Just boom, everything going, and you can easily lose your intention. And so,
Mm-hmm.
around Canadian Thanksgiving anyway, around October, it's great to go, okay, we've got the kids in rhythm. We've started up whatever we need to,
Mm-hmm.
programs we're in. Now I need to just take some inventory here and make sure that the rest of my fall isn't just in panic rush mode. And then
Yes.
again, like you said, Christmas break is almost that mini summer in the winter, right? A little break,
Mm-hmm.
New Year's startup. So there's some real neat ways, I think, to think about the actual calendar and slotting in where are the
Mm-hmm.
places that I need to be intentional about myself, my priorities. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, that was interesting to me to hear why the fall
Mm-hmm.
is good for
Mm-hmm.
you.
And so, mindfulness, paying attention, what's happening in my mind, what's happening in my body, where are the spaces that drain my energy, where are the spaces that rejuvenate me, who are the people who inspire and bring a sense of life giving energy, who are the people who sap and drain the energy, or
Mm.
like all of this is about awareness and paying attention. You talked in your sermon about going to the mall. For some people that is an energizing adventure.
Yes.
For
Yes. Right.
others it's like,
Mhm.
I need a vacation, I need a
Yes.
break. There's this concept about energy vampires,
Hmm.
right? And there can be people or places that after you've encountered them, you feel emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically drained,
Yep.
right? And so paying attention to that. And let's just say vampires are real. And
Hmm.
I'm not arguing for or against, I'm
Yes.
just
Yes.
using this as a metaphor. What are vampires designed to do?
Mm.
Suck blood,
Yes.
drain, right? And so we can be mad at the vampire of events, social events, or people, or we can put in healthy boundaries, grab our garlic necklaces, and not give the vampire a place to feed.
Mm.
Right? And
Hmm.
so boundaries are helpful in these sort of relationships where you're paying attention. Is this life giving or is this draining? I
Hmm.
can either eliminate the access or definitely limit their exposure. Both are really healthy boundaries.
Right. And I like that because it's like it's not like it's ever going to be possible to completely shield ourselves from energy vampires. I really like that. Right. That's part of life, whether it's at work,
Mm.
even to be honest, sometimes our kids can be a little bit of that,
Can be
like
family, can be
yeah.
family. Mm-hmm.
We think about the holidays, right? That's a big one for people, getting into that time of year. But I think having, like you said, again, that intention to go, okay, I know maybe this event coming up, family Christmas or whatever, I know this is going to be draining. So
Mm-hmm.
how do I, in the days that follow, have a rhythm that I poured myself out there? Now I need to be poured back into. I need to take care of myself. And yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think, again, like you said, just being mindful.
And, I want to add to that, Brad. It's about care before, during, and
Mm-hmm.
after.
Mm-hmm.
We're used to going at the speed of light, drop, collapse,
Yeah.
gather what remaining resource we have, speed of light, drop, collapse. What if we actually change that rhythm to fuel,
Mm.
expend, fuel, like in a more natural rhythm versus
Right.
drastic highs and lows?
Mm.
And so you're thinking about this social event. What do you need in preparation prior to?
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the social event, because energy is draining, whether it's fun or not, what do
Yep.
you need? Do you need to step outside for a moment? Step into the washroom, like disengage, regroup, refresh. And then what do you need after?
Mm.
Absolutely.
Well, it sounds a lot
Rhythm.
like waves, right? Instead of it being go, 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 crash, more kind of, riding that
Mm-hmm.
gentle wave thing. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's good. And I hope that's helpful for some people, because I know the weeks and season we're coming into, it's many different things to many different people, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
definitely has its social challenges for people, and trying to find some balance in all of that is important. So
Absolutely. The rhythm of life.
rhythm of
Rhythm.
life.
The rhythm of
Yes.
life.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah.
I'm sure we'll have much more to say, especially leading up to the holiday season, about
Yep.
how we can find rhythm, how we can find places of reflection
Yep.
and renewal.
Thank you, Grace, as always, for your time and wisdom.
Thank you. You as well, Brad. Always a
Thanks.
pleasure.
All
Take
right.
care.
Take care.